Hi, Kate. Hi, David.
Hello. Hi, Ellie.
As you both know, I'm Ellie Mason from the Charles Causley Trust, and we met each other this summer after or during our hugely successful Digital Festival of Arts and Literature. Kate and David, actually, you had a guest appearance via some video, and I know, Kate, obviously you were there as a video, kind of as an author talk, and obviously we're going to be following it up a little bit later with a Q&A session later in next month. And but the purpose of this video really is for anybody who perhaps missed the not just the event, but also the kind of connection that you've both got with Charles. We thought it'd be really nice to kind of take part in, or for you two to take part in our chats with. So we're recording a series of little interviews over the next kind of few months, really. I mean, obviously we'd all prefer to be face to face, but in the current climate it's not possible. So we thought we'd actually, yeah, and it's such a shame, but actually I think opportunities have arisen from it. So it's enabled us to be able to all connect from the places that we are around the country, have a cup of coffee, and also a little chat. So if that's okay, I'd like to kind of lead in with a question for David.
Of course.
Fantastic. So, David, tell us a little bit about how you knew Charles Causley. Did you hear that okay?
I didn't, I'm afraid,
no,
Ellie.
That's absolutely fine. Don't worry, it's the beauty of technology. So, can you tell us a little bit about how you knew Charles Causley?
Of course, yes, indeed. I knew Charles very well in my youth. We moved from London, my family, to Launceston in 1947, and I joined the National School. And during the years 1948 and 1949, most of 1949, I was a pupil of Charles Causley, and a very good teacher he was too. I very much enjoyed his teaching. My interest was in history and in English, and he was electrifying in his talks on history and indeed scriptures too. We learned an awful lot from it. But he was very good to me in other ways too. I flourished under his guidance. I was usually first or second in the class, but in 1949, my mother died, which was quite a big blow to the family and obviously to myself too. And Charles was very good. My performance dropped off very sharply after my mother died. He took me to one side and explained that his father had died when he was very young too, or younger than I was in actual fact. And he took me through it. So when I took the 11 plus, thanks to his guidance and support, I passed. So that was a very good thing. But there were two other features of his teaching too, which I think it's worth highlighting. There were a couple of boys in the class who became the subjects, I believe, of two of his poems. One was a very poignant one, Death of a Pupil, which I remember well. There was a boy in the class who was my friend called Edmund Rocky, and we had a shared interest in aeroplanes, an obsessive interest, I might say. And then one day, Charles announced to the class in very somber terms that Edmund had died. And the situation was this. He was playing on his bicycle at the crossroads at the top of St. Stephen's Hill, and a van or a car came by and clipped him and threw him in the air and broke his neck. So that was a very sad thing. And so we were all very affected by that, but Charles in particular, of course. The other one, more famous, of course, the Timothy Winters one, it was clearly, as Leonard Green made clear in his biography of Charles, this was Brian Martin. I knew Brian Martin very well too. He lived in Tyre Street, and I lived in Northgate Street, which is at the junction of Castle Street. So I was literally a couple of hundred yards away from his home. We often went to school together. He was a very poor child, indeed, very deprived. And this was an instance of, I mean, Charles was a very popular teacher. He was very fair, but he was no softy, he was no pushover, and he could be very firm at times, and he could be quite cross with people. And a particular occasion was when he asked us after Christmas to recount what we did at Christmas. We all wrote little short essays. By Martin, he was asked, we all read it out to class, he read it out. And he said at Christmas he had a Hornby 00 set, which he set out in a room, and he had carriages and stations and so forth. And the whole class laughed, because a Hornby 00 set in those days was quite expensive. I couldn't afford them, we couldn't afford one, and we knew jolly well that he couldn't too. Charles was extremely cross with the class, and he took us to task, and he said, Brian is showing a lot of imagination in his excellent essay, and it was a lesson to us, a homily. So those are two instances, I think, of where I was able to relate to the poems he wrote, and was affected by them too.
That's amazing. Timothy Winters is actually my favourite Causley poem. I did a bit of a stint as an art teacher, and obviously, though, the particular child that Causley wrote about was most definitely not the ones that I taught. However, I could absolutely name the children that were in my class that would have still fitted that description. So, and that's why it resonates with me, because there's a lot of people that don't think that the poem they think it's made up. But actually, when
No, he's not. Definitely was not, and because he mentioned it to me personally, and it's also in Green's biography too.
Yeah, it's a very moving and still true today to a point kind of poem. So yeah, that's fantastic. Well, actually, I was going to move on to, obviously the next question was going to be about what struck you most about Charles, but you've already kind of touched upon some of those things, and also given us some insight that we wouldn't have had. My granddad actually was taught by Charles as well. So
what year would that have been, I wonder?
Oh, I'm not sure. My granddad's long since passed. He's passed away. He was Jack Hillman. But yeah, he was taught by Causley too, and although joining the trust, I'm relatively new to the trust. I joined during lockdown, but had I known before, my granddad had passed away, then it would have been absolutely fantastic. I could have done an interview with mine. So it's great. Indeed. Yeah, but it's fantastic to hear your first-hand experience, David. That's great. So I'd like
to share another experience, if I may.
That would be great.
I'm not sure anybody would know about it. As I said, I formed a very good relationship with Charles, which lasted when I went to Launceston College after I took my 11+. I wasn't so happy at Launceston College. I didn't get on there as well as I should have done, really. And I fell out spectacularly with Howard Spencer Toy, the somewhat eccentric headmaster at the school. The reason of my falling out was that he was very keen that all the boys played an instrument for the orchestra, and I was deputed to play the English horn, and I soon realized I had no facility for it whatsoever. So after about a year, I dropped it with some relief, and he took against me for it. So when I left school, which was in 1955, just when I was about coming at nearly 17, I left school, decided I'd do something else, and I applied for a reference, and he gave me an extremely poor reference. It was practically an adverse one. I was so upset by it, I took it down to Charles to show him, and when he read it, he tore it up, and he went to his desk, and he said, "Stay here," and he wrote his own reference for me, which enabled me to move forward. And he was also helpful in another way too. I was applying for jobs, difficult to get jobs in those days. You had to move away from Launceston, so I was applying for jobs in Exeter and Plymouth. And he got me an interview with Freddie Griswold, who was doing quite a lot of work with the BBC in Bristol in those days. And Freddie Griswold was a well-known presenter there. Unfortunately, I was unable to go because I had flu or something. And the job was going to be in the sound effects department. It sounded very interesting. Anyway, time moved on, and I joined the civil service instead. I'd taken the exam at the same time, and I passed, and I moved on. But that was another example, I think, of Charles' support. Other people have examples, but I thought I would share that one with you.
That's a lovely one. And do you know what? Of all the interviews that I've been doing in terms of, so I had an interview with Patrick Gale last week, and Patrick's been researching Charles's life for his new book. And one of the things that anybody who any anecdotes that come through are really about Charles and how he really supported his community, and how actually supporting the individual was massively important to him. And what an absolutely generous and kind soul he was.
Very much so. So busy he was. When I was in the civil service, it would have been 1957 before I went into national service. He wrote me a line and said, would I like to join him at a symposium of poetry, which was taking place in Bath in the Otto rooms one winter evening, I remember. So with some trepidation, I did join him. It was quite a big event, a lot of people were there. But as soon as I got there, he sought me out and he stayed with me all evening. I thought, because he made readings, there were presentations and so forth. It was a very busy evening. And he took pains to introduce me to people around. I was introduced, believe it or not, to C.3. Sassoon.
Oh, wow.
He was quite elderly then. Well, he's younger than me, in actual fact. I think he's in the 70s then. But Charles was at pains. So I wrote him a letter afterwards to thank him for a most entertaining and invigorating evening. He wrote back and said, it was good to have you there. He said, I hate being with all the culture vultures, with his words. So another example, as you say, of his personal support for people, which was very well known. So goodness knows how he found the time to undertake all these kindnesses.
Absolutely, and that's definitely something that strikes you. He must have been very busy, ensuring other people were looked after and accommodated, potentially, and obviously his mother too as well, because I know obviously his relationship with his mother was a very close one. So, but like you say, goodness knows how he found the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kate, if it's okay, I'd like to ask you a question. So do you have any memories of Charles?
Yes, I do. So we were brought up in London in the southeast, but Dad would come every year, wouldn't we, Dad? Go for summer holidays in Cornwall, and every year we go and see our relatives in Launceston, and every time we go and see him, actually, and the very first time. I just remember him very kind, very engaging, obviously very fond of Dad, and for me that made him very special, because my dad was massively affected by the loss of his mother at a very early age, and he kind of helped fill the void, actually, didn't he, Dad? I think when you were at school, and he looked out for him as well. So lovely sunlit memories of meeting him. We all went, didn't we, Dad? All the kids. I'm one of 4. But he took interest in us, and we talked about his poetry. I loved Colonel Fazakerley Butterworth Toast at the time, because it was funny. I loved his poetry, and he really brought it to life. And we talked about Launceston, we talked about the shooting, but in very abstract terms. And then my other memories as a grown-up going back, Mum and Dad returned to Launceston in 1999. And Dad would take him out for lunch every month, and I was lucky enough to join him at the Springer Spaniel.
Oh, wow.
And we just had, and he liked the pie, didn't he? Like the pies, and we just had these very, it was almost like a family member, wasn't he? Like an uncle or something, just very easy company, entertaining, actually. And as Dad said, this great ability to tell a story that my dad has as well, actually, as you can probably tell. He can tell a story, bring it to life, which brought history to life for us as children, and gave us all an interest in, things that have gone before.
Absolutely. And to hear those things like that, that you take him to lunch at the Springer Spaniel and things like that. And actually the Springer Spaniel for me, albeit it's not a walk, as soon as you kind of get out of Launceston, nothing's kind of, down the road. But the Springer Spaniel's actually my local pub. So
there you go.
Yeah, it does take a little bit of walking. There's quite a lot of hills in the way. So the aim really is to drive there on a nice summer evening, and then you can walk back. But the walk back is still going to take you about an hour, because it's all
it would.
So only about 3 miles, but it takes you an hour because honestly, the up and down side of things is is quite extreme. So
yeah, but a place he particularly liked to go, because we used to think about once a month, and also when he went to the care home, I would drive there and take him out then. He was particularly fond of going to the North Coast, Crackington Haven, and Trebarwith Sand in particular. Funnily enough, I think he told me, that was Trebarwith Sand was the first time he saw the sea there. My first time I saw the sea, which was 1947, was actually Crackington Haven. So that was quite interesting. But
special.
But most alternately, used to have lunch at home here in Dunhead Road with us, which he used to enjoy, I think, most of all.
Yeah, and I kind of get the feeling not just the feeling, you can read in his poetry, he's a poet of place. So, and that's not that he harps back necessarily. So when he went to war, he wrote about the place he was at, the experience he had. So wherever he was, he kind of embodied that within his words, but always coming back to Launceston. I think, that was really, his hometown was really important to him.
And I think for my book, those are the poems which are his very best, his very excellent ones. Sir Henry Jekyll, Dockacre of Launceston Castle, those, I thought they're truly brilliant. Of course, when we used to discuss the poems, the one which I think affected him, and one which I think affected a lot of people, the haunting tale of Charlotte Diamond, the girl who was murdered on Bobbin Moor. And the story is that she was going out with a person who was clearly disabled in some way, but she was attracted to a farm boy in another farm. And the disabled boy walked her home one evening, but he returned alone, and her body was found a couple of weeks later with her throat cut. And he was completely illiterate. But he signed a confession, and he was hung in Bodmin. Now, Charles always brought the story up because he felt that a great wrong had been done. He felt it was the boy in the other farm that had committed the murder because of his jealousy that she was going out with this disabled boy. So that was very interesting and a very, very poignant poem, and one of my favourites, really.
Absolutely, and Kate, that actually kind of leads us on a little bit into, I know we had I had a couple of other questions planned, but to be fair, I think that kind of leads us nicely into to your book, and kind of, because it's about injustice, it's about a local injustice in Launceston. So can you just tell us, obviously there are people that will know a lot about it, some people have read it, some people saw your event at the Causley Festival, but for those that don't, do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
So the book I've written, is called An American Uprising in Second World War England, Mutiny in the Duchy, and it is about a dramatic shootout between American GIs on the streets of Launceston, and it made headline news at the time. An old witness told the Daily Mirror reporter that they hadn't seen anything like this since the days of the smugglers. It was a show-stopping story. And the court-martial that followed was headline news, not only in Britain, but in America too. And the reason for that is because it was a microcosm of everything that was wrong, and the tension, the racial tension in the segregated American army. And so this happened in the streets of Launceston. This is where the African-American soldiers, they made their stand. It was their stand against everything, every injustice that they had suffered, and they had suffered terrible injustices throughout joining up with the American army. And Charles Causley would definitely have been on their side. He would definitely have seen this terrible injustice of these guys who had signed up, would lay down their life fighting for a freedom that they were denied back home. In Europe, they were fighting to free people, and yet they went home and they had a very different type of life to those who lived in the north of the country. So he would have definitely been batting for the African-American GIs.
Absolutely. And I know that it's been extremely well received. The event itself that we had was very well attended. We've got a follow-up Q&A session for the 20th of November because we didn't get a chance. We ran out of time, basically, because it was just so popular. And I like the fact that actually there is, you know, I can imagine that's the kind of event, you know, that you know, Charles would have relished to have written about. Obviously, during that time, you know, he was...
And there was a connection too, Ellie. There was a connection because... in 1951, it would have been, when I was at college, I had a chance meeting with Charles in the square when he was writing his first and only book of prose, Hannah's the Dance of the Skylark. And we were talking about its publication, and I was interested to know how successful it was. And very impertinently, I asked him whether he was making any money out of it. And he laughed. He said, well, it's a story of a sea story, but on the other hand, he said, look at Launceston, how rich in stories it is from the time of William the Conqueror onwards. We were in the square outside Lloyd's Bank, which was next to the haberdashers at the time, Hicks, and he pointed to the plate glass window in Hicks, which still had a residual bullet hole through it from those days in 1943. And he said, well, that's a very interesting story. And he talked about segregation and the John Crow, which he'd come across a bit himself when he was in the Navy with his contacts with the US Navy in Gibraltar. And he thought it was such a wrong thing. So you're quite right. He would have connected with Kate's book very easily indeed. He would have been a great supporter of it, I believe.
That's amazing. That's really good. Guys, we've got about 8 or 9 minutes left. So I was just wondering if I could squeeze in another question, and then maybe Kate, you could just tell people where they can find out a little bit more about the book, because I'm sure it's piqued a lot of people's interest. So I was just going to ask you both. You were part of the digital festival that we had, and obviously because of COVID, things are very different now, especially for the arts sector. And I just wondered if you had a kind of view on really kind of how it's shaping up and what the future might hold, or how it's affected you.
Kate, do you want to go first, Kate?
Okay, yeah. So for me, COVID was, this is a book that I've been trying to write all my life. I made a Freedom of Information request to get the court-martial transcript in 2004. I finally got to look at it after children when the youngest one started primary school, 2016. So I was really excited about it coming out, and then COVID happened, and Dad and I were going to launch the book in Launceston. We were going to launch the book in Bath, near to where I live. We had these great plans, and in the end, it didn't come out when it was meant to come out, and it was rushed out in America. No one was ready for it. So it was all really tricky. But people like yourselves, there have been so many people with imagination and determination to get things out. So the Charles Causley Digital Festival, for me, fantastic. It enabled us to talk about it. I actually saw lots of members of the family on the screen, which is really good. And again, the North Cornwall Book Festival at home, that was fantastic. The Appledore had a drive-through festival. So people are really using this as a way to, just from my perspective, to try and get books out there, because I have read more in the last 6 months than probably the last 6 years. Because I don't want to read the news, I don't want to watch the news, I just want to escape. And so I've been reading lots and lots and lots, and loads of brilliant people like yourselves have been able to bring that to life to people. So that for me has been really exciting. And I really hope actually when things go back to normal, or the new normal, that we continue this digital, virtual strand, because I think it enables a lot of people who might not be able to get out to access it, because the technology makes it so easy. If Dad and I can figure out this Zoom, I'm sure other people can as well, and that opens up to so many more people. I know it's challenging though, isn't it?
It's for some, more than others, I'm afraid.
Sorry, Kate, I interrupted you.
No, not at all. But so for me, it salvaged something from disaster. It's different from whatever sector in the arts you are. You know, for life, for theatre, it must be devastating. And the cinema, for me, our dad and I were talking about it earlier today. For me, cinema is the one thing we do. I take my kids every holiday to go to cinema, and I don't care what I watch because I love going in and seeing a big screen, the surround sound. I love it. I find it exciting. It's a treat, and it's something I look forward to. So I really hope, we can work that out come next year, just other ways of accessing film in that exciting way.
Yeah, definitely. I hope so too. And I think for us at the Charles Causley Festival, we are absolutely going to be a hybrid version. So we're not sure what's going to happen for the Causley Festival next year. We don't know whether or not we're going to be able to hold a physical festival, whether it needs to be a hybrid or whether actually we can go back. But I think, definitely from our perspective, in the accessibility element of being able to broadcast to a much wider audience, we're really excited about kind of combining the two together.
And I've got to say, actually, on that point, somebody got in touch with me as a result of, well, quite a few people did actually, but one of these guys got in touch with me as a result of seeing the talk. And he told me, so he wouldn't have gone normally, but he told me a story about his mother, who was a bus conductress in Plymouth at the time. And she stood up to a white American officer who was trying to evict 2 African American soldiers from her bus. And this 21-year-old, this plucky kind of woman was saying, no, we don't do that in this country. Either you get off or you let them sit down.
Oh.
So it's been fantastic for my research, actually, because, as you say, other people who might not necessarily have got into Launceston for that event have been able to tune in and see. So it's been wonderful, really good for, for us. And we've loved doing it, haven't we, Dad? Dad?
I'm not sure. I think maybe the screen's frozen. But we've only got a few more minutes, so I just kind of want to say thank you to you both. It's been an absolute pleasure. This is the first kind of father and daughter duo we've had, so it's brilliant, and we're just really excited about the fact that this could take the format going forwards for us, and being able to put stuff on YouTube and make it really accessible for everybody. So we've got a whole program of the chats planned, so everybody can stay tuned either on YouTube or our newsletter or our website. We'll update them all so that people can see them. And then this talk will go out in about a week's time. And then just for anybody who is interested, obviously we've got the live Q&A going to be happening on, I think it's 6 p.m. we've got it planned, isn't it? 6 p.m. on the 20th of November. But we'll be pushing that out over social media so people can take part in a live Q&A. So yeah, we better get planning on that one.
Yeah,
but I just want to say thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you both.
Oh, it's always lovely talking to you, Ellie. And I've got to say, you at the Charles Causley Trust, you've been pioneers.
Thanks very much indeed, Ellie.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Thank you. That's such a lovely thing to say. It's great. And it's so nice to be able to bring Charles to life for people.
Oh.
And I think that's what this does.
I mean, we've grown up hearing this, so it's always been a bit of a legend in our family. Not only his poetry, just the kindness and the fact that he wouldn't let someone stick it to Dad as a young boy. I mean, to give someone a bad reference, I mean, I find it quite funny because I know it's got a good ending, but to give someone, who's had a disadvantaged start to life, a bad reference is awful, and he wouldn't take that. And we love that, and he's quite romantic sort of element to him. He's quite heroic, I think, and it's nice that you know that, Dad, isn't it?
I mean, Charles was a person who had a good word to say for everybody, but apart from Howard Spencer Toy, he disliked him greatly. I think there must have been I think when he was in the early days at the National School, I think that there was some slight took place between them. And Charles used to get very agitated about talking about Spencer Joy. So it was, but it did me a great favour, of course, in writing a reference at the time. It saved me.
So before we run out of time, I'd just like to say a massive thank you, and obviously look forward to doing more. Certainly, obviously, with you, Kate, in the Q&A.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for having us.
Wonderful.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Thank you very much, Ellie. Thank you. Bye-bye.